watching Property TV.
Hello, welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and this is the programme where you can have all of your property related questions answered by a team of property experts. Joining me today is Joanna Leggett, co-founder of Leggett Immobilier, French property experts, all the way from France on Zoom. Welcome, Joanna.
Hi, Stephen. Thank you. Nice to see you again.
And joining Joanna is John Howard, property developer, mentor, author, public speaker. I'm not sure what else, but lots of other things too.
Good to be here.
Good.
Good to see you.
How was the trip from Ipswich?
Well, I'm still waiting for this lunch. I don't know when it's going to happen because for the last year we've been talking about it, Stephen.
Oh, I see.
And you don't need to save up for it, so I'm not sure.
This is my trip to Ipswich.
Trip to Ipswich. We haven't got many flats left, so you're going to have to hurry up.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, we'll arrange it shortly.
Please
How's
do.
that? Okay, well, let's get on with the questioning. And Joanna, you're going to go first. With regards to staying in France, since we left the EU, could the panel please explain the 90 and 180-day rule, as I am totally confused. Me too. Also, do the limitations apply if you own a property as opposed to perhaps just renting or visiting? So we've got a rather complicated residency status in France, haven't we?
Well, it's not really that complicated. I mean, usually people who buy a holiday home would be very lucky if they stayed 90 days in a holiday home. You'd probably have to be able to work from home to be able to do that, because most people that are in employment might get 6 weeks holiday a year and would probably rent the property for the rest of the time. However, we do see a lot of people that might live in France for 6 months and in the UK or anywhere else for 6 months, so it will affect them. It makes no difference whether you own the property or you're renting the property, it's still the same. However, if you look at becoming a fiscal resident in France, so if you had gone over the 180 days and you say you're 183 days, then you'd actually be a tax resident in France, which means you'd have to pay all of your taxes in France anyway. So before the new rule came in, you could stay up until that amount without becoming an actual resident of France, still being a resident in the UK. So yes, now they have brought in the 90-day rule, which means that you can only stay in any country in Europe. So even if you came to France for 2 weeks, then went on to Spain, then went on to Italy, the maximum you're allowed out in Europe now is 90 days. However, there are lots and lots of visas available. If you wanted to extend your stay because it's your holiday home or for whatever reason, you can go to the embassy and you can apply for different types of visas, whether you're studying, whether it's a work permit, whether it's an extended holiday visa. There's loads of different visas available, and if you go onto the government and British Embassy website or the French Embassy website, there's loads and loads of help available, and it describes each visa in detail, and it tells you which one you need to apply for. The only thing I will say though is if you are applying for it, you need to do it before you come to France, because if you don't have it when you go in, you have to leave within the 90 days. Or you can apply for residency and come to live in France, but then you would obviously become a tax resident.
Joanna, if you were there and you needed an extension, I think I'm right to say that in the UK, if that was the case, you'd actually have to leave the country and make that application outside of the country. Is that the same in France?
Well, the problem is with the 90-day rule is that you can't come back in for another 90 days. So realistically, if you left the country, you have to be out of the country for another 3 months. You can't sort of leave, make a visa application and come back. You would literally have to do it before you go. Obviously, there's circumstances, say there was a funeral or something, drastic happened, or you're hospitalized and things like that. There are exceptions to every rule, but you can't just cross the border back into the UK, apply for a visa and come back in 3 days later. You would have to be out of the country for 3 months. So that's why it's so important to apply for it before you go.
Yeah, it all sounds very petty, doesn't it, Stephen? Don't you think?
Well, I'm presuming that when you say that if you were travelling around Europe and you'd gone to Spain or Portugal, so does this apply to the Schengen area effectively?
Yes, it is the Schengen areas, and they are stamping British passports now. I've been backwards and forwards to the UK quite a few times, and they stamp my passport every day, every time, so they can see when you've gone in and when you've come out. I mean, for me, I don't really need that to happen because I have a carte séjour, which is, my residency permit. However, they are stamping passports, so they can check the dates that you've come in and out. So, just to be wary of that if you are thinking of staying more than 90 days. We have a lot of people that come through in camping cars, for example, who do a lot of the European areas, and even if they're looking for properties, but they now can't continue. You've literally got 90 days in all of those Schengen areas before you have to leave.
Okay, and the questioner says, well, can you explain the difference between the 90 and 180-day visa? One can't become the other, or it's not the French authorities' gift to judge which one you have, is it? Or how does it
No,
work?
the 90 days is just the rule. So that's the maximum you can stay without a visa. So you don't need a visa. If you're just coming for 90 days, you don't need a visa. You don't need anything. You can just arrive in France, Spain, Italy, or anywhere within Europe without a visa. It's once you go over the 90 days that you need a visa. And if you go over 180 days, you actually become a French taxpayer, or your fiscal residence then becomes French, because you've obviously been in the country for too long not to be a taxpayer. So up to 90 days, you don't need anything. You can travel freely.
That could be an expensive long weekend if you made a mess of that, couldn't it?
Yeah. Well, a couple of days, yeah.
Well, I'm trusting, John, that I wouldn't need a visa to come to Ipswich.
You certainly don't. You're very, very welcome.
Okay.
A lot of people are investing in Ipswich at the moment because it looks very good value for money compared to the rest of the country.
Are you getting foreign investment now?
We're getting a little bit of foreign investment, not a lot, because it's not a well-known city. I mean, Cambridge is always a good one for that. Cambridge, Oxford, they like to hang the hat on somewhere they've heard of.
Yes.
I'm
I'm certainly hearing from a lot of agents that the spread of foreign investment in the UK is widening.
Yeah, and
people are looking
you can
across
understand
the country.
why, because the yields in London are so small. So you can understand Manchester, obviously popular. Everyone's heard of Manchester, Birmingham, Liverpool to a point, even. So Leeds doesn't seem to quite have the same mark, which is interesting. But I mean, then you've got Hull, which is perhaps slightly below the others in many ways, but in terms of price. So it's a real industry now compared to when 20, 30 years ago, Stephen. This is a real industry, and people are who sell to these foreign investors are making a lot of money.
Okay, all right, John. I'm going to answer your question now. I live in a relatively large residential building containing around 300 units. Recently, some of the outside of the building has become damaged through extreme weather conditions and possibly aggravated by the use of poor quality building materials. The freeholders tell us that we must pay for these repairs as the insurers insuring the building have declined liability. Is this our liability now, or is it the freeholders? As the freeholder appointed the insurers, they should have made sure it was covered, and further, it's their building and therefore perhaps the liability should rest with them, insured or not. What do you think to that one?
Isn't it amazing, Stephen? People buy, they don't own the fabric of the building, but they own the flat. And then when there's any repairs to do, they say, oh no, sorry, it's someone else's responsibility. Now, if they owned the house rather than a flat, freehold, they would just have to pay for it themselves, or sort of the insurance out
John,
themselves.
they don't own freehold, they own
Well,
leasehold,
yeah, but the
don't they?
lease will say that they are, and it would have been explained to them that they pay for all external maintenance is paid one way or the other, through the insurance premium, which they've paid, or if it doesn't, they have to pay it. It's not for the freeholder to pay it. Well, it is the freeholder to pay it and then claim it back. But the freeholder is just really holding, these days, freeholds, it's very difficult owning a freehold in many ways, because really all you're really doing is holding it really in goodwill for the residents. And in many cases, the residents are buying these freeholds anyway. So I think it's a bit of a moot point for me. And I think the person that's emailed that in probably knows full well what the answer is. But you know what? You know,
I
if they want any sympathy from me, they won't get it.
No, well,
because
I'm gathering that, John.
They've bought a flat. They've bought a flat, knowing all the consequences. They would have more to explain to them. And as I said, if they owned a property outright, freehold, they would have the same problem. They'd have to pay for it.
Right, I do agree with you, but I think the key here is to go back to the lease and
the lease will tell you what the lease will say. You know what the lease will say.
I'll have 10 quid on it. That the lease will say that whatever expenses the freeholder incurs, he's able to reclaim that through the service charge.
Sure, absolutely.
I think the only slight caveat here could be that if it turns out that the insurers won't insure
mismanagement,
I would want to know why they turned
was it
down.
Mismanagement? Have they not come up with the right policy?
Was it inferior materials? Was it a cut price insurance policy or whatever?
But even inferior material,
But coming back to that, I would say that the leaseholders would have a claim against the freeholder if in fact it was the freeholder that built the construction and didn't meet building regs in some way. But that's so unlikely because we're fairly well controlled these days. And I think it's one of those things, if they have a particular gripe on this, they need to get really expert and properly qualified legal advice.
But as usual, it's the freeholder that's that's taken the hammering, you know. And like you said, it's probably they probably never constructed the building. The building was probably constructed and had a completion certificate issued by the council on it. So at the end of the day, why does everyone these days want to blame someone else for everything? You know, it's the government's fault for everything, nearly, isn't it?
Well, I think we have this problem over the cladding business, don't we? I don't necessarily believe that it's taxpayers' responsibility to repair the cladding on buildings that other people have either built or
the cladding
sold.
situation is very unfortunate because no one really is at fault unless it's combustible cladding. That's different. That is wrong, and someone must be sued for that.
But then the building inspector should have picked that up, shouldn't they?
Well, the fire officer certainly should have done. In each case, the fire officer's got a huge responsibility in these cases.
Okay, well, on that contentious note, we'll go to our break. So join us after the commercial break. Look forward to seeing you.
You are watching Property TV. You are watching Property TV.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time with Joanna Leggett and John Howard. Welcome back, guys.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Joanna, your final question. I'm about to buy a French property from an English couple who have been resident in the property in the south of France for some years. When looking for property in France, I was generally advised that I should not pay anything directly to the sellers, but pay only the notaire. However, these English sellers are suggesting that there is an exception to this rule where both the buyer and seller is English. Can the French property expert advise on this, please? Sounds like a is my money safe question, doesn't it?
Well, first of all, you can't buy property in France without going through a notaire because the notaires are working for the government. They're the tax collectors. They do all of the searches on the property. They collect the government taxes, etc., etc. They are neutral, so they can work both for the buyer and the seller. And so they're not working for any specific person in particular. Usually, if the English couple that own the property, when they bought the property, they would have had a notaire. It's usually normal to use the same notaire again because that notaire knows the property, has the deeds for the property, etc., etc. Quite rightly, you would never, ever transfer money to a vendor directly. Even in private sales where there's no agency involved, you would always have a notaire who would have a client's holding account. So when a deposit has to be sent, that would never go to the seller. It would always go to the notaire. The notaire would then hang on to that deposit until it was ready for completion, and then you transfer the rest of the money over to the notaire's client holding account for payment to the vendors. Because the two, if the couple that are selling the house in France are moving back to the UK and they wanted to do a sterling to sterling exchange, That can be possible. We've done very, very few of them. Doesn't really benefit really that much, apart from the fact you could hold the rates. So you could both agree on a rate in pounds, and then that would be paid in pounds in the UK. However, you'd still have to pay a tax representative to come and value the house to make sure that there wasn't anything underhand going on, and the government was still paid their taxes on the sale of that property. So it's quite a complicated way of doing it. The easier way of doing it would be to fix the rate with a currency broker, so that you're still paying for it in euros, but you fix the rate up front. So if it's a very good euro rate, you know, so you're getting 119 or 120 or something really good, is to fix that rate and hold it, because then you know that the property price isn't going to go up or down. It's going to stay at the same amount because you fixed your rate with a currency broker. You can do sterling to sterling, as I said before, but it is quite complicated. No real benefits for that that I've seen in the past. But definitely do not send any money to anybody unless you have a signed contract with the notaire. If you're not using an agent, you're buying privately, everything must go through the notaire. Nothing is ever dealt with between two clients as such.
Sounds like good, solid safety advice.
If you don't mind me saying, these notaires are independent. I think I've got a solicitor who's been independent for the last 35 years as well. I think he only works for himself, really. So I can't see the difference.
Yeah, I think that's pretty typical.
Yeah, I think so, probably, yeah.
Okay. All right, Joanna, thanks very much for that. I think the message really there is stick to the proper system, isn't it?
Yes, it is the simplest way of doing things, and there's no extra charges. You really don't have to get in a tax expert from the local authority to come and check the price of the house and all things like that. So it is much simpler to just follow the straightforward, because buying in France is really straightforward and very easy, and totally protects the vendor and the buyer, because it's even agencies are registered in France. It's a registered profession. So you have to have licenses to even sell a property in France. It's just quite different to the UK.
John, that's just an interesting subject, just that we spend 30 seconds on. You're in a very regulated business in France, and as you say, you have to have a qualification to be able to sell property, and a qualification of competence, I would suggest, probably rather more than legal qualifications. But do you think that's something we could benefit from in the UK?
Yeah, I mean, the French system is very different to the UK system. I mean, in the UK, you can complete an exchange on the same day, and that's often how gazumping can happen, which very rarely happens in France, because you can exchange contracts within 3 days of making an offer, and then the vendor cannot physically sell that to anybody else once the vendor has signed. So you're quite protected. In the same respect, for us as an agency, you know, all our agents who hold the cards for the agency have to have legal qualifications to be able to run the estate agency. There's 42 hours of training that has to be done every year. You know, there's an awful lot of regulations that doesn't happen in the UK. And in France, every visit is accompanied. You can't go by yourself and just talk to the vendor. You would be accompanied by an agent unless you're buying privately. I think it would benefit the UK. I think there's lots of things, it's particularly the safety aspect and the lack of disappointment. You know, if you suddenly get gazumped, where that very, very, as I said, very rarely happens in France.
Okay, good. What do you think of that, John?
The fees, I believe, in France for an estate agency are probably, the fees that you get are probably much higher than they are in the UK.
I have a tear coming from the corner of my eye.
So
John.
on that basis alone, Joanna, I think the system in the UK is not bad.
Okay. John, put your construction hat on.
Yes.
What do the panel suggest is the premium cost for producing an ecologically green house against that of a standard product? What also would the panel suggest are the most important of current green specifications to include in a new build spec?
Okay, so you're talking to a dinosaur. That's the first thing you've got to remember.
Right,
okay. If you watch any of those other property shows, which aren't as good as this one, especially the ones with design in them, you will see that all these eco-type houses always go over budget by an absolute fortune. And it might make good television, but it doesn't do your bank account much good. So that's the first thing. So all these eco houses up to now have been a lot more expensive to build than traditional bricks and mortar. Those costs are coming down, to be fair. They are getting cheaper as more and more of them being built, which is understandable. The government are hell bent on it. The government will give you grants if you build an eco house. So that's good as well. Carbon neutral is what they're all looking at. So the carbon neutral part of that is what you need to aim for. Carbon neutral. In terms of heating, yes, because you've got fantastic insulation, the heating can be incredibly cheap to run these houses, which it isn't with a more traditional house. I accept that. And you have to balance that out against the cost of it costing more. Now, the other thing which is really important is saleability. So, is a valuer going to value a house 30% more because it's cost 30% more or not?
Is that the sort of figure it would be?
I think so, yes. So sometimes 50% more. So who would have thought some straw would cost so much? Sounds cynical, don't I? So that's the problem. The problem is, are you going to get it valued at more money? I've got people through my joint venture fund who come to me and say, oh, we're going to build 4 eco houses, and my heart sinks because I don't know. Oh, and they're going to cost, they're worth 30% more, 40% more than a normal house. I'm going, well, you might think that, but I can't possibly put my money into that, thinking I'm going to get 40% more. I have to assume I'm going to get the same. And if they look different and a bit odd, we may not get that much. So you've got to be careful with them. I think if you're building a home to live in yourself and the end value is not quite so important, then great, that's fantastic. If you're building a home to sell, you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful because you only need one valuer to say, no, I don't value it at 30% more. I value it at the same as the house down the road. What do you do? Very difficult, very difficult.
I think the worry that I have is that a lot of these green innovations are not yet tried and tested. I was involved with a development down the road here where the local authority insisted that 2 of these biomass boilers were put in.
Hugely expensive.
I think they were £1.5 million each.
Yeah.
Neither of them ever got used because it suddenly dawned on people that the combustible wood chips were an absolute fire hazard for the building.
The 2 things I haven't mentioned I should do also is can you get mortgages on them? And you have to prove a 60-year life for the BRE, British Research Establishment. So you need to get a certificate to prove they will last 60 years. So those are another 2 challenges. I'm not saying you can't, and many can now, but there's still for me to build a development like that will be too risky still.
Yeah, okay. And do you find that the big house builders are moving towards?
Not really.
No.
And that tells you everything you want to know because they want to know, they want to build them competitively.
Yes.
Competitively.
And of course, the more these things cost, it's more to the detriment of young people trying to buy their first home.
You've got to be realistic. You've got to be there's got to be some realism to it.
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in today's show. So to Joanna, thank you very much for joining us, Joanna. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too, both of you, of course.
Thank you very much for the mention.
John Howard, thank you very much for coming all the way from Ipswich to join us. Thank you for watching. And don't forget, if you have any questions for our panel of experts, do get in touch with us through the website, which is propertytv.uk. So I'm Stephen Galpin. Look forward to seeing you next time on Property Question Time.